The cafeteria at Riverton Academy buzzed with the particular energy of lunchtime, a symphony of clinking silverware, hushed conversations, and the occasional burst of laughter that echoed off the polished marble walls. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over mahogany tables, where students in pressed uniforms dissected their gourmet meals with the casual precision of those born to privilege. Vega sat alone at a corner table, her tray balanced carefully on the edge as she sketched in the margins of her notebook. Her sandwich, homemade turkey on white bread, wrapped in yesterday's newspaper, looked modest next to the artisanal offerings her classmates enjoyed. But Luna had learned to make herself small, to occupy just enough space to exist without drawing attention. She didn't see Owen Park approaching until his shadow fell across her sketchbook. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Well, well, Owen's voice carried that particular tone, honeyed cruelty wrapped in prep school charm. If it isn't the scholarship girl and her bag lunch. Luna's pencil stopped moving. She didn't look up, hoping silence might make him lose interest. Owen thrived on reactions, fed on the discomfort of others. Around them, conversations dimmed as heads turned toward their table. "I'm talking to you," Owen said, his voice louder now. His friends, Connor Mills and James Hartford, flanked him like a well-dressed pack. "My mom says your dad was at our house yesterday, fixed our guest bathroom toilet." Heat crept up Luna's neck. She closed her sketchbook slowly, deliberately. So, Owen grinned. "I think it's hilarious that while you're sitting here pretending to belong, your daddy's probably elbow deep in someone else's shit right now." The cafeteria had gone nearly silent. Luna felt dozens of eyes on her, waiting to see if she would crumble or fight back. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her tray. "That's enough," came a quiet voice from behind Owen. Everyone turned. Daniel Vega stood in the cafeteria entrance, his worn work clothes stark against the academy's pristine backdrop. He carried a toolbox in one hand and wore the kind of calm that came from years of handling difficult situations without raising his voice. Owen's smirk faltered for just a moment before returning full force. "Oh, perfect, here's the man himself." He turned back to Luna with renewed cruelty. "Hey everyone, meet Luna's dad, Riverton Academy's finest toilet technician." The words hung in the air like smoke. Some students snickered. Others looked away uncomfortably. Luna's face burned with shame, not for her father, but for the ugliness Owen was trying to paint over something she'd always found beautiful. Her dad's quiet competence, his ability to fix what was broken. Daniel walked toward their table with measured steps. His steel-toed boots echoed against the marble floor like a countdown. When he reached Luna's table, Owen stepped aside, perhaps expecting an angry confrontation, maybe even hoping for it. Instead, Daniel knelt beside his daughter's chair. "You okay, Misha?" His voice was gentle, meant only for her. Luna nodded, but her throat felt tight. She wanted to disappear, to evaporate into the marble and crystal, and never face another day at this place. Daniel saw it in her eyes, the particular kind of hurt that comes from being made to feel small for things beyond your control. Owen wasn't finished. "Seriously though, Mr. Vega, thanks for unclogging our guest bathroom. My mom was worried we'd have to cancel her book club." The cafeteria held its breath. Students watched Daniel's face, waiting for anger, for the working man to lose his temper, and confirm every stereotype they'd been fed about people like him. Daniel stood slowly and looked at Owen with the kind of quiet assessment he usually reserved for broken pipes, noting the problem, considering solutions, deciding on the most efficient approach. "Your mother was very polite," Daniel said evenly. "She made sure I had everything I needed to do the job right." The simplicity of his response deflated Owen's performance. No anger to mock, no outburst to fuel more ridicule, just calm professionalism. From across the cafeteria, Harper Liu watched the exchange with growing admiration. In her 2 years at Riverton, she'd seen parents storm in demanding meetings, firing off emails thick with legal threats. But Daniel's restraint, his refusal to be baited into a scene, carried more dignity than any of their bluster. Owen tried once more. "Must be nice having such low expectations. Bet you never have to worry about college applications or—" "Owen?" The voice was sharp, cutting. Marisol Rivera stood behind the serving counter. her brown eyes fixed on the boy with the kind of look that had kept 3 teenagers in line for 20 years. "Your mother called, said to remind you about your dentist appointment." It was a lie, smoothly delivered. Marisol had never spoken to Owen's mother. But it gave the boy an exit, a way to leave without losing face completely. Owen glanced around, realized his audience was growing restless, and shrugged as if the whole thing had been beneath his interest anyway. "Come on, guys, let's go find somewhere that doesn't smell like." He gestured vaguely at Daniel's work clothes before walking away, his friends trailing behind. The cafeteria slowly returned to its normal volume, conversations resuming in cautious whispers. Luna stared at her untouched sandwich, her appetite gone. "I have to fix a sink in the science wing," Daniel said quietly. "You want to walk with me?" Luna shook her head. "I should stay, finish lunch." Daniel nodded, understanding. Making her leave now would only add to the spectacle. He squeezed her shoulder gently, a touch that said more than words could. That he loved her, that this wasn't her fault, that they would figure it out together. As Daniel picked up his toolbox and headed toward the exit, Harper Lou intercepted him near the doorway. "Mr. Vega?" She kept her voice low. "I'm Ms. Liu, Luna's English teacher." Daniel paused. "Is there a problem?" "No problem. I just wanted you to know Luna has real talent. Her writing, her insights, she's special." "I know she is." Harper hesitated, then pressed on. "She shouldn't have to hide that. This place," she glanced around the cafeteria, at the marble and crystal and casual cruelty. "Sometimes it makes good kids feel like they have to make themselves smaller." Daniel followed her gaze, seeing his daughter still sitting alone at her corner table, still pretending to eat her sandwich while the weight of humiliation settled on her shoulders. "Thank you," he said simply, and Harper heard in those 2 words a father's gratitude for seeing his child clearly. As Daniel left the cafeteria, Marisol appeared at his elbow like a guardian angel in a hairnet. "That boy's been picking at Luna for weeks," she said without preamble. "His mother's on the parent board. Think that makes him untouchable." Daniel nodded grimly. "What do you know about the parent board?" Marisol's laugh was dry as autumn leaves. "Honey, I know everything about this place. Been cleaning up their messes for 15 years. She paused, studying Daniel's face. "You thinking of doing something about it?" Daniel looked back through the cafeteria windows, where Luna was finally packing up her lunch, her movements careful and deliberate, a girl who had learned to navigate hostile territory with quiet precision. "I'm thinking," Daniel said slowly, "that Luna deserves better than this." Marisol smiled, the first genuine expression he'd seen in the building all day. "Now that," she said, "is exactly what I was hoping you'd say." Samuel waits without speaking, neither encouraging nor discouraging the conversation. "I was wrong to try to end your friendship with Ryan. I was wrong to use my position on the board to attack your character. And I was wrong about your motivations for caring about my son." Alexander's corporate composure cracked slightly. "I was also wrong 15 years ago when I chose profit over principles and lost the best partner I ever had." Samuel's expression doesn't change, but something in his eyes suggests he's hearing more than just words. "I let fear drive my decisions," Alexander continues. "Fear that Ryan might judge my choices the way you did. Fear that he might choose meaning over money, service over success. Fear that I might lose him the way I lost you." "You didn't lose me, Alexander," Samuel says quietly. "I made a choice to leave, just like I made a choice to walk away from wealth after Maria and Isabella died. Those were my decisions, not punishments I inflicted on you. But you were right. About what we were becoming, about what mattered, about the cost of success without purpose." Alexander's voice drops to almost a whisper. "I spent 15 years trying to prove you wrong, and all I proved was that money can't buy the things that actually matter." Samuel studies Alexander's face, seeing genuine remorse alongside the pride and pain that have shaped him for decades. "The question now," Samuel says, "is what you plan to do with that knowledge." Alexander looks at his son, then back at Samuel. "I'd like to start by asking if there's any way to salvage what we once had. Not the business partnership. I know that's gone forever. But maybe the friendship that existed before we let ambition and ego destroy it." Samuel considers this, aware that Ryan is watching both men with the intensity of someone whose future happiness may depend on their ability to find common ground. "Friendship requires trust," Samuel says finally, "and trust requires consistency." I won't be your friend on Mondays and your enemy on Tuesdays, depending on how threatened you feel by my relationship with Ryan. I understand. And I won't pretend that your actions over the past month didn't hurt. They did. But I also understand that fear makes people do things they wouldn't normally consider. Alexander nods, accepting the gentle rebuke. As for Ryan, Samuel continues, looking at the young man who has become like a son to him, he doesn't belong to either of us. He's his own person, with his own choices to make about who he wants to become and how he wants to live. Our job, both of us, is to support those choices, not direct them. Even if he chooses differently than we'd prefer, Alexander asks. Especially then. Ryan watches this exchange with something approaching wonder. Two men who have shaped his understanding of what it means to be human are finding their way back to each other, not through grand gestures or dramatic reconciliations, but through honest conversation and mutual recognition of their shared failures and hopes. There's something else, Ryan says, drawing both men's attention. I want to apply for that art competition Mrs. Chen mentioned. And I want to use my real name, not hide behind anonymity or try to downplay where I come from. Alexander's first instinct is to worry about exposure, about judgment, about failure. But he catches himself, recognizing these as his fears, not Ryan's. What would you create, he asks instead. Portraits. Of people who see others clearly. People who choose kindness over convenience, who find dignity in honest work, who measure success by how much good they bring into the world. Samuel smiles. That sounds like a worthy project. It does. Alexander agrees and means it. As they prepare to leave the maintenance building, Samuel calls out to Alexander. There's one more thing. The board meeting, the speech today. Ryan showed tremendous courage standing up for what he believes in. You should be proud of him. Something like what? Standing up for a student who's being bullied? Something like creating unnecessary drama with influential families. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Daniel could imagine Harper's face, young idealism crashing against institutional reality. He'd watched it happen to good people before, seen them choose between their principles and their paychecks. I see, Harper said finally. So Luna just has to endure it. Because Owen's parents write checks. Now you're oversimplifying. Am I? Mrs. Whitmore cleared her throat diplomatically. Perhaps we should focus on practical solutions. If the girl is struggling to fit in, maybe we could suggest some adjustments to her presentation. Help her blend in better. Daniel closed his eyes. They were talking about his daughter like a problem to be managed, not a child to be protected. What kind of adjustments? Harper asked, her voice flat. Oh, you know, perhaps her father could park around back when he comes for maintenance. Less visible. And maybe she could pack lunches that look more appropriate for our environment. You want her to hide who she is. I want her to succeed here, Mrs. Whitmore said primly. Sometimes success requires adaptation. And what message does that send to the other students? That it's acceptable to mock people for their work, their background, their economic status? Ellsworth's chair creaked as he shifted. Harper, I understand your concerns. I really do. But sometimes the best thing we can do for a student is help them navigate reality, not try to change the entire world. I'm not trying to change the entire world, Harper said quietly, just this small corner of it. Pick your battles, Mrs. Whitmore advised sagely. Some things aren't worth the fight. A child's dignity isn't worth fighting for? The question hung in the air, unanswered. Daniel heard the scrape of chairs, the rustle of papers being gathered. The impromptu meeting was breaking up, and he needed to make himself visible before someone wondered why the coffee machine was still broken. Just let it cool down, Ellsworth said as footsteps approached the door. These things usually resolve themselves if we don't fan the flames. By resolve themselves you mean Luna learns to accept her place, Harper said. I mean everyone moves on. That's how these places work, Harper. You'll learn. The door swung shut, leaving the lounge in sudden silence. Daniel waited a few minutes before emerging from behind the partition, his toolbox in hand. He'd fixed the coffee machine, but the real problem, the rot at the heart of this institution, would take more than a wrench to address. As he packed up his tools, Daniel thought about Luna sitting alone at her corner table, forcing herself to finish a sandwich she'd lost all appetite for. Thought about Harper Lou, fighting a system designed to wear down idealists. Thought about Owen Park, learning that money and influence could shield him from consequences. Most of all, he thought about his uncle's cryptic comments over the years. Uncle Roberto had been a quiet man, kept to himself, never married. But sometimes, when Daniel visited, the old man would make strange remarks about that fancy school and people who think money makes them better. Daniel had always assumed it was just bitterness, the resentment of a working man who'd never gotten his due. But now, cleaning up his tools in a lounge where teachers casually discussed covering up injustice to avoid inconveniencing wealthy parents, Daniel wondered if his uncle had seen something he'd missed. As he headed toward the exit, Daniel passed Harper Lou in the hallway. She was standing by her classroom door, key in hand, looking like someone who just watched her idealism take a beating. "Ms. Liu," he said quietly. She turned, startled. "Oh, Mr. Vega, how did the coffee machine turn out?" "Fixed, for now." Daniel paused, weighing his words carefully. "Thank you for what you said back there, about Luna." Harper's cheeks flushed. She glanced around the empty hallway, then stepped closer. "I probably shouldn't have. I mean, I don't want to make things worse for her." "You didn't make anything worse. You told the truth." "The truth doesn't seem to carry much weight around here." Daniel studied her face, young, earnest, already showing the small lines that came from fighting battles no one else wanted to acknowledge. "Maybe not yet," he said, "but that doesn't mean it never will." As Daniel walked toward his truck, he thought about truth and weight, about systems designed to protect some at the expense of others. He thought about Luna, probably in art class now, carefully not mentioning what had happened at lunch. Most of all, he thought about Uncle Roberto's will, sitting in an envelope on his kitchen table. He'd been meaning to deal with the lawyer's call for weeks, kept putting it off because paperwork felt less important than paying bills and fixing things. Tonight, he decided, he'd make that call. The art room at Riverton Academy was Luna Vega's sanctuary, the one place where her difference felt like an asset instead of a liability. Natural light poured through tall windows, illuminating easels arranged in careful clusters, paint-splattered stools, and walls covered with student work that ranged from tentative to brilliant. Here, creativity mattered more than pedigree, and Ms. Chen encouraged her students to find their authentic voices rather than imitate what they thought they should create. Luna sat at her usual spot near the window, working on a charcoal drawing of hands. Not just any hands. Her father's hands, weathered and capable, holding a wrench with the same gentle precision he used to braid her hair. She'd been working on the piece for weeks, adding layers of shadow and light, trying to capture not just the physical details but the story they told. The hands in her drawing had fixed broken pipes and mended torn screens. They'd changed diapers and checked homework and signed permission slips. They'd held her mother's fingers during those final hospital stays and later held Luna herself when grief threatened to drown them both. These were hands that built and repaired and protected, and Luna was determined to show their beauty. "That's really something," said a voice behind her. Luna looked up to see Chloe Martinez, one of the few students who'd ever spoken to her without mockery or pity. Chloe came from money too, but the new kind. Her father was a tech entrepreneur, her mother a surgeon, and she seemed less invested in the invisible hierarchies that governed Riverton's social landscape. "Thanks," Luna said, automatically angling her sketch pad away from the door. She'd learned to be protective of her work, especially after an incident last month when Owen had made loud comments about her weird obsession with poor people. "Seriously, Luna, you've got real talent. My mom went to art school. She'd flip over this." A warm glow spread through Luna's chest. Compliments on her art felt different from other praise, more genuine, less obligatory. When people admired her drawings, she felt seen in a way that had nothing to do with her second-hand uniforms or homemade lunches. "Ms. Chen says I should enter the regional youth competition," Luna admitted, "but I don't know." "Are you kidding? You'd crush it." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of Owen Park's voice in the hallway, growing louder as he approached the art room. Luna's shoulders tensed automatically. Owen wasn't in art class. He took sculpture, which met during 6th period, but he often wandered the halls during lunch, looking for entertainment. "Telling you, it was hilarious," Owen was saying to whoever was with him. "The guy shows up in his work clothes, looking like he just crawled out of a sewer, and starts having this little heart-to-heart with his precious daughter. Luna's pencil stopped moving. Her drawing of her father's hands suddenly felt exposed, vulnerable. I almost felt bad for her, Owen continued, now clearly in the doorway. Almost. But then I remembered, if you can't handle a little reality check, maybe fancy private school isn't for you. Luna kept her eyes fixed on her sketchpad, hoping invisibility might work if she just concentrated hard enough. But Owen's attention, once focused, was like a searchlight. Well, well, he said, stepping into the room. If it isn't our resident scholarship case, still drawing pictures of the working class? Connor Mills and James Hartford flanked him like always, their laughter coming on cue. Luna felt heat creep up her neck, but she didn't respond. Silence had worked before. Sometimes. Let me guess, Owen said, moving closer to her easel. Another heartwarming portrait of blue-collar authenticity? Maybe your dad fixing someone's toilet again? Leave her alone, Owen, Chloe said, but her voice lacked conviction. Even allies at Riverton learned to pick their battles carefully. Owen ignored her, circling Luna's easel like a predator. You know what I find fascinating? The way poor people romanticize poverty. Like there's something noble about being broke. Luna's hand tightened on her pencil. The charcoal smudged slightly. I bet you'll hang this in your little apartment, Owen continued, right next to your participation trophies and your Goodwill furniture, a shrine to settling for less. Something hot and sharp twisted in Luna's chest. She'd endured weeks of comments about her father's work, her own appearance, their small apartment above the hardware store. She'd absorbed every casual cruelty, because fighting back only made things worse. But this, mocking the drawing that had taken weeks to perfect, dismissing the hands that had held her world together, this was too much. At least I know what my father's hands look like, Luna said quietly. The art room went still. Owen's smile faltered for just a moment. What's that supposed to mean? Luna looked up from her drawing, meeting his eyes for the first time in months. When's the last time you saw your dad without a phone in his hand? When's the last time he helped you with homework, or made you dinner, or asked about your day? Owen's face darkened. My father is a very successful attorney. I know, everyone knows, he's also never here. The truth hung in the air like smoke. Everyone at Riverton knew about Owen's father. The high-profile cases, the frequent business trips, the way Owen spent most afternoons and weekends alone in their empty mansion. At least my father can afford to send me here without begging for scholarships, Owen shot back, but there was something desperate in his voice now. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Yeah, Luna said, standing slowly. At least. For a moment, they stared at each other across the art room. Two kids carrying different kinds of wounds, different kinds of shame. Then Owen's face twisted with something ugly and familiar. You know what? I'm tired of pretending to care about your feelings. He reached for the container of paint water sitting on Luna's table, muddy brown from cleaning brushes, bits of charcoal floating on the surface like debris. Luna saw what was coming and moved to protect her drawing, but Owen was faster. The dirty water hit her sketch pad dead center, soaking through pages of careful work. The charcoal smeared and ran, her father's hands dissolving into abstract shadows. Weeks of patient detail disappeared in seconds. Luna stared at the ruined drawing, watching water drip onto the floor. Something broke inside her chest, not her heart, but something harder and more dangerous. The careful control she'd maintained for months snapped like an overstretched wire. You bastard, she whispered. Then she shoved Owen as hard as she could. He stumbled backward, more surprised than hurt, but played up the impact like she'd attacked him with a weapon. He crashed into an easel, sending paints and brushes scattering across the floor in a cascade of color and noise. She assaulted me! Owen shouted, loud enough to bring teachers running. Did everyone see that? She attacked me for no reason? Students began gathering in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. Luna stood over her ruined drawing, paint water still dripping from her hands, finally understanding what they meant when they said someone saw red. For no reason, she said, her voice shaking. You destroyed my drawing. You destroyed weeks of work. It was an accident, Owen said, straightening his uniform with theatrical precision. I was just trying to get a better look at your art. The lie was so smooth, so practiced, that Luna almost doubted what she'd witnessed herself. But the calculating gleam in Owen's eyes reminded her that this wasn't spontaneous cruelty. It was strategic. He'd been planning something like this, waiting for the right moment to push her past her breaking point. Miss Chen appeared in the doorway, taking in the scene with the rapid assessment of someone used to managing teenage drama. Paint water spreading across the floor, scattered art supplies, Owen adjusting his shirt like a victim, Luna standing rigid with fury. What happened here? Luna attacked me, Owen said immediately. I was just admiring her drawing and she completely lost it, shoved me into the easel. Several students nodded, confirming the second half of his story. They'd seen the shove, the dramatic fall. They'd missed the deliberate destruction of her work, the calculated provocation that preceded it. Luna opened her mouth to explain, then closed it. What was the point? Owen's version would be believed, because Owen's version was always believed. He was charming and popular, and his family donated buildings to the school. She was the scholarship girl with anger management issues. Luna? Miss Chen's voice was gentle but concerned. Is that what happened? Luna looked down at her drawing. Her father's capable hands, now an indistinct smudge of gray and brown. All those careful hours, all that patient love rendered into muddy water on an art room floor. Yes, she said quietly, that's what happened. Ms. Chen sighed, clearly knowing there was more to the story, but lacking the evidence to pursue it. Owen, are you hurt? I'll be fine, Owen said bravely. Just shaken up. I never expected Luna to be violent. 20 minutes later, Luna sat in Principal Ellsworth's office while her father was called to the school. Her uniform was still damp with paint water, her hands still stained with charcoal that had transferred from her ruined drawing. Ellsworth sat behind his desk, wearing the expression of a man who'd rather be anywhere else. Luna, you seem like a nice girl, he said, his tone suggesting disappointment rather than anger. But we can't have students physically attacking each other, regardless of the provocation. What provocation? Owen interjected from his chair beside the door. His mother, Victoria Crane, sat next to him in a designer suit that probably cost more than Daniel's monthly rent. I was literally just looking at her artwork. Victoria spoke for the first time since arriving. Mr. Ellsworth, I have to say, this kind of behavior is exactly what I was afraid of when we started accepting students from different backgrounds. The anger, the violence, it's simply not compatible with Riverton's culture. Luna's stomach twisted. She wanted to defend herself, to explain what really happened, but the words felt thick and useless in her throat. Mrs. Crane, I appreciate your concern, Ellsworth said diplomatically, but let's not jump to conclusions about… Conclusions? Victoria's voice sharpened. My son was physically assaulted by a student who clearly has difficulty controlling her emotions. What conclusions am I supposed to draw? The office door opened, and Daniel Vega stepped inside, his work shirt still bearing traces of the plumbing job he'd left to come here. He looked first at Luna, scanning for injuries, then at Ellsworth, with the calm attention of someone trying to read a complicated situation. Mr. Vega, Ellsworth stood, extending his hand. Thank you for coming so quickly. Daniel shook his hand but kept his eyes on Luna. What happened? There was an altercation in the art room, Ellsworth said carefully. Luna pushed Owen, and he fell into some equipment. Daniel's gaze moved to Owen, who was doing his best to look like a traumatized victim, then to Victoria Crane, who watched him with the barely concealed disdain of someone forced to share air with the help. Luna? Daniel's voice was quiet, non-judgmental. Tell me what happened. For the first time since the incident, Luna felt tears threaten. Her father's simple request, tell me what happened, contained more trust and respect than she'd received from any adult at this school in months. He destroyed my drawing, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The one of your hands. I'd been working on it for weeks, and he poured paint water all over it. Daniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. On purpose? Luna nodded, not trusting her voice. That's not what witnesses reported, Victoria interjected smoothly. Multiple students confirmed that Owen was simply examining her work when she became aggressive. Multiple students, Daniel repeated, his tone carefully neutral. Any of them see what happened before Luna pushed Owen? Ellsworth shifted uncomfortably. The point is, Mr. Vega, that regardless of what preceded it, physical violence can't be tolerated. I agree, Daniel said simply. Physical violence shouldn't be tolerated. Emotional violence either. Victoria's eyes narrowed. Are you suggesting my son? I'm suggesting, Daniel said, meeting her gaze directly, that maybe we should be asking why a straight-A student with no history of violence suddenly lost her temper. The room fell silent. Luna stared at her father, amazed by his quiet strength, his refusal to be intimidated by suits and titles and barely veiled threats. Nevertheless, Ellsworth said after a moment, Luna did push Owen. That's a clear violation of our conduct code. What's the consequence? Daniel asked. Typically, a 3-day suspension for first-time physical aggression. Victoria leaned forward slightly. Of course, given the circumstances, the ongoing pattern of concerning behavior, perhaps something more substantial would be appropriate. Daniel's voice remained level, but Luna heard something steel hard underneath. What pattern? Well, Victoria said delicately, there have been multiple reports of Luna having difficulty adjusting to Riverton's social environment. Perhaps this incident suggests she's not quite ready for the academic rigor and social expectations of our community. She was suggesting expulsion, not directly, but clearly enough that everyone in the room understood. Luna felt the world tilt sideways. I see, Daniel said. He was quiet for a long moment, looking at Owen, then Victoria, then Ellsworth. So Luna pushes someone after weeks of harassment, and she's the one who doesn't belong here. That's a rather dramatic interpretation, Ellsworth began. Is it? Daniel stood, placing a gentle hand on Luna's shoulder. Well, here's what I think. I think Luna will accept whatever consequence you decide is appropriate for pushing Owen. But I also think this conversation isn't over. Victoria's smile was sharp as glass. Mr. Vega, I hope you're not threatening. I don't make threats, Daniel said quietly. I fix problems. And right now, it seems like Riverton has a pretty serious problem. He looked down at Luna. Ready to go home, mija? Luna nodded, gathering her backpack with hands that only shook a little. As they reached the door, Daniel paused and looked back at Ellsworth. 3-day suspension? That's correct. Starting tomorrow? Yes. Daniel nodded once. Then we'll see you Monday. As they left the office, Luna could hear Victoria's voice rising in indignation, but her father's hand on her shoulder made it seem distant and unimportant. In the parking lot, Daniel opened the passenger door of his truck and waited while she climbed in. I'm sorry, Dad, she said as he started the engine. I know you don't need trouble at school on top of everything else. Daniel was quiet for a moment, navigating through Riverton's tree-lined streets. Finally, he said, Luna, I want you to listen to me very carefully. She nodded. You have nothing to apologize for. You stood up for yourself when no one else would. That took courage. But I got suspended. Yeah, you did. And that's not fair, but it's not your fault either. Daniel glanced at her, his expression serious but not angry. Sometimes standing up means there are consequences. That doesn't mean it wasn't the right thing to do. Luna felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. The drawing is ruined. The drawing can be remade. You remember every line, every shadow. It's all still in here. He tapped his temple. Art isn't just on the paper, Mija. It's in the artist. As they drove past the manicured lawns and expensive cars of Riverton's neighborhood, Luna felt something shifting inside her. Not healing. That would take time, but a kind of recognition. Her father was right. The drawing lived in her hands, in her eyes, in her understanding of what made something beautiful. Owen could destroy the paper, but he couldn't touch what mattered. Still, as Daniel pulled into their modest apartment complex, Luna couldn't shake the feeling that this was bigger than a ruined drawing or a 3-day suspension. Victoria Crane's smile had promised consequences beyond anything Principal Ellsworth could impose. For the first time in months, Luna found herself wondering not if things would get worse, but how much worse they could get before something finally broke. And whether, when it did, she and her father would be strong enough to weather what came next. The law office of Morrison & Associates occupied the 3rd floor of a downtown building that had seen better decades. Faded brass nameplates marked doors along a narrow hallway, and the elevator wheezed between floors like an old man climbing stairs. Daniel Vega sat in the waiting area, turning a business card over in his hands and wondering why his uncle's lawyer had insisted on meeting in person for what should have been a simple probate matter. 3 weeks had passed since Luna's suspension. She'd returned to school with her head high and her sketchbook full of new drawings, but the tension at Riverton Academy had only intensified. Victoria Crane had made it clear that the Vega family was no longer welcome in their, quote, community, and Owen's behavior had escalated from casual cruelty to calculated harassment. Daniel had requested a meeting with Principal Ellsworth, only to be told that all concerns needed to go through the Parent Advisory Board, the same board chaired by Victoria Crane. It was a neat little circle, designed to protect the status quo and exhaust anyone foolish enough to challenge it. Which brought him here to this shabby office building, holding a card that read James Morrison, Estate Attorney, and trying not to think about how much this meeting might cost. Mr. Vega. A woman emerged from an inner office, middle-aged, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, wearing the sort of practical dress that suggested competence over fashion. "I'm Sarah Chin, Mr. Morrison's assistant. He's ready for you now." Daniel followed her into an office that managed to be both cluttered and organized. Law books lined the walls, case files covered every horizontal surface, and behind a massive oak desk sat a man who looked like he'd been practicing law since the building was new. "Daniel Vega," Morrison said, rising to shake hands. His grip was firm, his smile genuine. "I'm sorry for your loss. Roberto was a good man." "Thank you." Daniel settled into a worn leather chair. "I have to admit, I'm not sure why you needed to see me in person. Uncle Roberto didn't have much. A small house, some old tools." Morrison's expression shifted, becoming more formal. "Actually, Mr. Vega, that's why I asked you to come in. Your uncle's estate is more complex than you might expect." He reached for a thick folder, the kind that suggested complications. "Before we begin, I need to verify your identity. You are Daniel Eduardo Vega, son of Maria Santos Vega and Eduardo Vega, nephew of Roberto Santos Vega." "That's right." Morrison nodded and opened the folder. "Your uncle was a very private man. Did he ever mention his business interests to you?" Daniel frowned. "Business interests? Uncle Roberto fixed air conditioners and did electrical work, same as my father did before he died." That's what most people thought. Morrison pulled out a document, studying it carefully. "But Roberto was also what we call a silent partner. He invested in various ventures over the years, usually through shell companies and trusts. Very quietly, very carefully." "I don't understand." Morrison leaned back in his chair. "Daniel, did your uncle ever mention Riverton Academy?" The question hit Daniel like cold water. "The school? Where Luna goes?" "Where Luna goes, yes. Your uncle was one of the original investors when the academy was founded 37 years ago." Daniel stared at the lawyer, trying to process what he'd just heard. "That's impossible. Uncle Roberto barely finished high school. He worked with his hands his whole life." He did indeed work with his hands, but he was also smarter with money than anyone realized. Morrison turned the document around so Daniel could see it. When Riverton Academy was being established, they needed significant capital. Your uncle provided it, through a series of carefully structured investments. The document was filled with legal language that might as well have been ancient Greek, but Daniel could make out enough to see his uncle's name attached to figures that made his head spin. He bought shares in the school? More than shares. Over the years, as other investors sold their stakes or died off, Roberto quietly acquired their portions. Always through intermediaries, always keeping his involvement hidden. Morrison pulled out another document. "According to the terms of his will, you now own 52% of Riverton Academy's founding trust." The office went silent except for the hum of an ancient air conditioning unit. Daniel stared at the papers, certain he'd misunderstood something fundamental. 52%, he repeated slowly. "Controlling interest," Morrison confirmed. "Legally speaking, you are now the majority owner of one of the most prestigious private schools in the state." Daniel felt like someone had just told him he'd inherited the moon. This has to be a mistake. Morrison shook his head. "I've handled Roberto's legal affairs for 15 years. He was very specific about his intentions. He left detailed instructions about how the inheritance should be structured, when it should be revealed, and what powers it would convey." "What powers?" Morrison consulted another document. "As majority owner, you have the authority to approve or dismiss the principal, approve the annual budget, and set overall policy for the institution. You could, theoretically, fire the entire faculty tomorrow if you chose to." The room seemed to tilt sideways. Daniel thought about Luna sitting in Principal Ellsworth's office, apologizing for defending herself. Thought about Victoria Crane's cold smile and casual threats. Thought about teachers who looked the other way when wealthy students bullied poor ones. Why? Daniel asked. Why didn't he tell me? Why keep it secret all these years? Morrison leaned forward, his expression becoming more personal. Your uncle was a complicated man. He believed in education, but he was suspicious of institutions. He watched Riverton Academy for decades, saw how it operated, who it served, who it excluded. He paused. Roberto never had children of his own, but he had strong opinions about how children should be treated. Daniel remembered his uncle's occasional comments about fancy schools and people who think money makes them better. Comments he'd dismissed as the bitterness of a working man who'd never gotten his due. He knew about Luna, Daniel said, the pieces finally clicking together. He knew she was going to Riverton. He kept track of your family. When Luna received her scholarship, Roberto saw it as an opportunity. He wanted to see how the school would treat a smart girl from a working-class family. Morrison's expression darkened slightly. I suspect he wasn't surprised by what he observed. Daniel stared at the documents spread across Morrison's desk, legal proof that his blue-collar uncle had been playing a longer game than anyone imagined. He was testing them, and preparing for this moment. Roberto believed that sometimes the only way to change a system is from the inside. Morrison gathered the papers into a neat stack. The question now is what you intend to do with this authority. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, thinking about power and responsibility, about the difference between having authority and knowing how to use it. Finally, he said, what are my obligations, legally speaking? Legally, very few. The trust is structured to give you broad discretionary powers. You could sell your stake, delegate authority to others, or take an active role in governance. The choice is entirely yours. And if I choose to take an active role? Morrison smiled for the first time since the meeting began. Then Riverton Academy is about to have some very interesting board meetings. Daniel signed the necessary papers with hands that shook slightly, not from fear, but from the strange sensation of watching his entire world shift in the space of an hour. As Morrison walked him to the elevator, the lawyer handed him a thick envelope marked personal, in his uncle's familiar handwriting. Roberto left this for you, Morrison said. He wanted you to read it after you learned about the inheritance. In the parking garage, Daniel sat in his truck and opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in his uncle's careful script. Danny, if you're reading this, then you know the secret I kept for 37 years. You probably think I'm crazy, and maybe I am, but I watched that school from the beginning, saw what it was becoming, who it was serving and who it was crushing. When Luna got her scholarship, I knew this day would come. I could have told you sooner, could have made things easier for her. But I needed to see if Riverton Academy had any hope of redemption, or if it was too far gone to save. Now you know what I know. The question is, what you're going to do about it. You have power now, Danny, real power, the kind that can't be bought or intimidated or dismissed. Use it wisely. Use it to protect children like Luna, not just from bullies, but from a system that teaches them their worth depends on their zip code. Your father would be proud of the man you've become. I am too. With love and respect, Uncle Roberto. P.S. Don't let the bastards grind you down. Daniel read the letter twice, then carefully folded it and tucked it into his wallet next to a photo of Luna. Outside, the city hummed with its usual evening rush, people heading home to families and problems and small triumphs. But inside his truck, Daniel Vega sat in the gathering darkness and felt the weight of unexpected responsibility settling on his shoulders. Tomorrow, he would still be the man who fixed broken pipes and repainted classrooms, but now he was also the man who could reshape an institution, who could turn power into justice and authority into accountability. The question, as his uncle had noted, was what he intended to do about it. Daniel started the truck and pulled out of the parking garage, already knowing the answer. Daniel Vega had always been good at reading buildings. 20 years of repair work had taught him to see past surface appearances to the bones underneath. Which walls were load-bearing, which pipes were ready to burst, which electrical systems were accidents waiting to happen. But as he walked through Riverton Academy's halls with his toolbox and his devastating secret, he realized he'd been reading the institution all wrong. He wasn't just the maintenance man anymore. He was the owner, studying his own property with new eyes. It had been a week since the meeting with Morrison, a week of carrying the knowledge of his inheritance like a hidden weapon. Daniel had told no one, not Luna, not even Marisol, while he worked out how to proceed. The lawyer had given him copies of Riverton's financial records, disciplinary reports, and board meeting minutes going back 5 years. Daniel spent his evenings reading through them like detective stories, piecing together patterns that were both shocking and utterly predictable. The scholarship fund that had brought Luna to Riverton? 40% smaller than it appeared on paper, with much of the money redirected to facility improvements that seemed to coincide with the enrollment of particularly wealthy students. The disciplinary system that had suspended Luna for defending herself, riddled with exceptions and special considerations for children whose parents sat on various boards or made significant donations. Most damning of all were the board meeting minutes, where Daniel found Victoria Crane's influence documented in careful corporate language. She'd successfully lobbied to eliminate the school's free lunch program, students should take personal responsibility for their nutrition, fought against need-based transportation assistance, in quoting dependency, and pushed for stricter behavioral standards that seemed designed to push out anyone who didn't fit Riverton's narrow definition of acceptable. Armed with this knowledge, Daniel began his own investigation. "You're spending a lot of time in the administrative wing lately," Marisol observed as they crossed paths in the main hallway. She carried a mop bucket in one hand and wore the expression of someone who'd noticed everything and was deciding how much to share. "Broken printer in the main office," Daniel replied, which was technically true. He had fixed a printer. He'd also spent 30 minutes photographing disciplinary files with his phone while the secretary was at lunch. Uh-huh. Marisol's tone suggested she wasn't buying it. "And that explains why you were in the basement records room yesterday. How?" Daniel stopped walking. Marisol was sharper than most people realized, a necessity for anyone who'd survived 15 years of institutional politics while raising 3 kids on a custodian's salary. If she was asking questions, she'd already drawn conclusions. "How much do you know about how this place really operates?" he asked. Marisol set down her bucket and looked around the empty hallway. "Honey, I know everything about how this place operates. Question is, why are you suddenly interested?" Daniel made a decision. "Can you keep a secret?" "Kept plenty of them already. What's one more?" "Luna's not the first scholarship kid to get pushed out." "Is she?" Marisol's expression grew grim. "Not even close. Last year it was Marcus Johnson, football player, smart as hell, full ride to 3 colleges. Victoria Crane decided he was too aggressive after he complained about being passed over for team captain. Year before that, twin sisters named Rodriguez. Their mother cleaned houses for some of the board members. What happened to them? Same thing that'll happen to Luna if you don't do something about it. Suspension for minor infractions. Harassment that stops just short of actionable, steady pressure until the families decide it's not worth the fight." Marisol picked up her bucket. "Rich people don't like reminders that poor people can be just as smart as their kids. Makes them nervous." Daniel absorbed this information, adding it to the growing file in his head. What would it take to change things? "A miracle," Marisol said flatly. "Or someone with enough power to make Victoria Crane's life uncomfortable." She studied Daniel's face. "Why? You got someone in mind?" Before Daniel could answer, Harper Lou appeared at the end of the hallway, walking quickly toward them with the purposeful stride of someone on a mission. She looked tired, dark circles under her eyes, stress lines around her mouth that hadn't been there at the beginning of the school year. "Mr. Vega," she said, slightly out of breath, "I was hoping I'd run into you." "Problem with your classroom?" Daniel asked. "No, can we talk privately?" Marisol made herself scarce with the practiced ease of someone who knew when to disappear. Harper waited until she was gone before speaking. "It's about Luna and Owen Park and this whole impossible situation that's about to get worse." Daniel set down his toolbox. "What happened?" "Owen's been bragging. About getting Luna suspended. About how his mother is going to clean house at the next board meeting." Harper's voice dropped to just above a whisper. "Victoria Crane is pushing for Luna's expulsion. She's calling it a pattern of behavioral issues." Daniel felt something cold and sharp settle in his stomach. Based on what? One incident, the art room thing, but she's spinning it as part of a larger problem. Luna's inability to adapt to Riverton's culture, her disruptive influence on other students. Harper's hands clenched into fists. "It's complete bullshit, but she's got Ellsworth scared. The man's terrified of losing donor support." When's the board meeting? Thursday, 3 days from now. Harper looked around the empty hallway, then back at Daniel. Mr. Vega, I know this isn't your fight. You're just trying to make a living and raise your daughter. But Luna is special. She's brilliant and talented, and she deserves better than this place if this is how it's going to treat her. Daniel nodded slowly. She does deserve better. I've been thinking about calling the newspaper. Maybe if there was publicity, some attention from outside. That might backfire, Daniel said gently. Make things worse for Luna. Harper's shoulders sagged. Then what? I can't just watch them destroy a kid's future because she had the audacity to stand up for herself. Daniel picked up his toolbox, his mind racing through possibilities. He thought about his uncle's letter, about power used wisely, about the difference between revenge and justice. Miss Liu, he said carefully, what do you know about Riverton's founding trust? Harper frowned. The trust? Not much. Some wealthy families pooled money to start the school back in the 80s. Why? Who makes the big decisions? About policy? About personnel? The board of trustees, I guess. But they're all appointed by the original investors or their heirs. Harper's frown deepened. Mr. Vega, where are you going with this? Just trying to understand how the system works. Daniel started walking toward the exit, Harper falling into step beside him. You said Victoria Crane has influence because of donations? Massive influence. Her family's given millions over the years. She basically owns Ellsworth. What if someone else had more influence? Harper stopped walking. What do you mean? Daniel turned to face her, weighing his words carefully. Hypothetically speaking, what if someone with real authority, legal authority, decided to change how things work around here? I'd say that person would need to be very careful. Victoria Crane doesn't lose gracefully, and she has connections everywhere. Harper studied Daniel's face. This is more than a hypothetical question, isn't it? Daniel was quiet for a moment, listening to the sounds of the school around them. Distant conversations, locker doors slamming, the everyday noise of an institution that had forgotten its purpose. Thursday's board meeting, he said finally. Will it be public? Board meetings always are, state law, but the only people who usually attend are the board members and Ellsworth. What if someone else showed up? Someone with questions about how the school is being run. Harper's eyes widened slightly. Mr. Vega, what are you planning? Daniel shouldered his toolbox and smiled, the first genuine smile he'd worn since learning about his inheritance. I'm planning to fix something that's been broken for a long time. That evening, Daniel sat at his kitchen table with Luna, helping her with algebra homework while his laptop displayed Riverton Academy's organizational chart. Luna worked through problems with the focused intensity she brought to everything that mattered to her, occasionally asking questions that showed she understood the underlying concepts better than most adults. Dad, she said during a break between problem sets, are you okay? You seem different lately. Daniel looked up from his laptop screen, where he'd been studying the bylaws that govern board meetings. Different how? I don't know. Less worried, maybe? Like you have a plan. Smart kid. Too smart for her own good sometimes. I do have a plan, Daniel said, but I can't tell you about it yet. Luna nodded, accepting this with the matter-of-fact trust that broke his heart and made him determined never to let her down. Is it a good plan? Daniel thought about his uncle's letter, about power and responsibility, about the difference between having authority and knowing how to use it well. I think so, he said, but ask me again on Friday. The Riverton Academy auditorium held 300 students and felt every bit as imposing as it was designed to be. Mahogany paneling rose to meet coffered ceilings, while oil portraits of distinguished alumni gazed down with the sort of painted dignity that money could buy. At the front of the room, Principal Ellsworth stood behind a podium that had been used for decades to announce honors, scholarships, and the occasional disciplinary reminder about dress codes and proper behavior. Today's assembly had been called with less than 24 hours notice, unusual for an institution that planned everything months in advance. Students filled the seats with the restless energy of teenagers pulled away from their regular schedules, their conversations a low hum of speculation and complaint. Luna Vega sat in her usual spot, 3 rows from the back, aisle seat for easy escape if needed. Since her suspension, she'd become even more careful about visibility, even more conscious of the attention that seemed to follow her like smoke. Owen Park sat near the front with his usual entourage, occasionally glancing back in her direction with the satisfied expression of someone who'd won a game she hadn't realized they were playing. "Attention, students," Ellsworth began, his voice carrying the particular tone of someone reading from a script he hadn't written. "This morning I have the privilege of announcing a new initiative at Riverton Academy, made possible by the generous support of an anonymous benefactor." Luna straightened slightly. Anonymous benefactors were unusual at Riverton, where donors typically expected their names engraved on buildings and scholarship funds. Most of the school's wealthy supporters preferred public recognition for their generosity. "Effective immediately," Ellsworth continued, "we will be implementing the Respect in Action program, a community service initiative designed to help students develop empathy, work ethic, and appreciation for all forms of labor that keep our school functioning." A ripple of confusion passed through the auditorium. Community service at Riverton usually meant organized charity events, fundraising galas, toy drives, carefully supervised volunteer work that looked good on college applications. This sounded different. Students who were involved in disciplinary incidents, fighting, bullying, destruction of property, or other violations of our conduct code will be assigned to work alongside our maintenance and custodial staff. They will learn firsthand about the dignity of physical labor and the importance of treating all community members with respect. The confusion grew louder. Owen Park turned around completely, his earlier satisfaction replaced by something that looked like alarm. "The program begins this afternoon," Ellsworth announced. "Students who have been involved in recent disciplinary matters will report to the maintenance office at 3:15 for their first assignment." Luna felt her heart rate increase. She'd been involved in a recent disciplinary matter, her suspension for pushing Owen. Was this some new form of punishment designed to humiliate her further? "I want to be clear," Ellsworth continued, his voice gaining strength as if he were warming to the topic, "that this program is not intended as punishment, but as education. We believe that understanding and appreciating all forms of work, academic, artistic, and physical, will help our students become better citizens and more compassionate human beings." The assembly ended with more questions than answers. Students filed out in clusters, their conversations animated by speculation and complaint. Luna lingered until most of the auditorium had emptied, then made her way toward the exit. "Luna." The voice belonged to Harper Liu, who was waiting near the back doors with the expression of someone who'd just witnessed something she didn't quite understand. "Did you know about this?" Luna shook her head. "First I'm hearing of it. It's unusual. Ellsworth's not typically one for bold new initiatives, especially ones that might upset parents." Harper glanced around the empty auditorium. "An anonymous benefactor with enough influence to launch a program overnight, that's serious money, serious power. Do you think it's real? The part about learning dignity of labor?" Harper considered this. "I think someone wants to teach these kids something they're not learning at home. Whether they'll actually learn it," she shrugged, "we'll see." At 3:15, Luna stood outside the maintenance office with a group of students she'd never expected to see in detention together. Owen Park was there, of course, along with Connor Mills and James Hartford, his usual crew. But there were others too. Sarah Chen, who'd been caught cheating on a chemistry exam. Marcus Webb, suspended for skipping classes. Even Brittany Lawson, whose parents were major donors but whose attitude towards school staff had finally crossed a line. The maintenance office occupied a corner of the school's basement, its cinder block walls painted institutional green and decorated with safety posters and work schedules. Daniel Vega emerged from an inner room carrying a clipboard and wearing the sort of calm authority Luna recognized from home, her father in problem-solving mode. "Good afternoon," he said, making eye contact with each student in turn. "I'm Mr. Vega, and for the next 2 weeks, you'll be working with me and the rest of our maintenance team to keep Riverton Academy functioning." Owen's hand shot up. "Mr. Vega, there's obviously been some mistake. My mother's on the school board, and she definitely didn't approve any program that requires students to do manual labor." Daniel consulted his clipboard. "Owen Park?" "Yes, sir." "You're here because you destroyed another student's artwork and then filed a false report claiming you were assaulted. Is that accurate?" Owen's face flushed. "That's not how." "Is it accurate?" Daniel's voice didn't rise, but something in his tone made Owen's protest die in his throat. "I guess." "Good. Then you understand why you're here." Daniel looked around the group. Let me be clear about something. This isn't punishment. This is education. Over the next 2 weeks, you're going to learn what it takes to keep this school running. You're going to work alongside people who've dedicated their careers to creating an environment where you can learn and grow. And you're going to develop some appreciation for work that doesn't get the respect it deserves. Luna felt a flutter of pride listening to her father speak. He commanded attention without demanding it, conveyed authority without arrogance. These were skills she'd watched him develop over years of dealing with difficult customers and impossible situations. Your first assignment, Daniel continued, is simple. Marisol Rivera, our head custodian, is going to teach you how to properly clean a classroom. You'll work in teams of 2, and you'll clean until the room meets professional standards. Brittany Lawson raised her hand tentatively. Mr. Vega, how long will this take? I have piano lessons at 5. That depends on how quickly you learn to do the job right. Daniel's expression was patient but firm. Ms. Rivera has been cleaning these classrooms for 15 years. She knows the difference between quick and thorough. Marisol emerged from the supply room pushing a cart loaded with cleaning supplies, mops, buckets, spray bottles, rags, and industrial vacuum cleaners. She looked over the assembled students with the assessing gaze of someone who'd supervised reluctant workers before. "All right, children," she said, her voice carrying just enough authority to make even Owen straighten up. "First lesson. There's no such thing as unskilled labor. There's only labor you haven't learned to respect yet." She began pairing students off, Owen with Marcus Webb, Connor with Sarah Chen, Luna with Brittany Lawson. Each team was assigned a classroom and given basic supplies. "Standard process," Marisol explained as they gathered around her cart. "Trash first, then surfaces, then floors. But pay attention to details. Gum under desks, fingerprints on whiteboards, dust in corners where vacuum cleaners don't reach. You're not just making things look clean. You're creating an environment where people can do their best work." Luna found herself paired with Brittany, whose family had endowed the school's music wing and whose attitude toward staff Luna had observed with distaste for months. Brittany treated custodians and maintenance workers like furniture, useful but invisible, unworthy of acknowledgement or thanks. Their assigned classroom was Mr. Peterson's AP Biology lab, a space that saw heavy use and showed it. Lab tables were scarred with chemical stains, floors dotted with dried specimens, and windows clouded with months of accumulated grime. "This is disgusting," Brittany muttered, pulling on rubber gloves with the expression of someone handling toxic waste. "It's just dirty," Luna replied, surprised to find herself defending a mess she hadn't made. "People work here every day it gets used." They started with the trash, emptying bins, collecting discarded papers, scraping gum from underneath tables, with the sort of patience Luna had learned from watching her father work. Brittany complained steadily for the first 20 minutes, but gradually fell into the rhythm of systematic cleaning. "I never realized how much stuff gets left behind," Brittany said, holding up a pencil she'd found wedged between lab table sections. "I mean, I lose things all the time, but I never thought about who finds them." Luna nodded, using a putty knife to remove a particularly stubborn wax stain from a table surface. "My dad says every job teaches you something about the people who come before you and after you." They worked in companionable silence for a while, the classroom slowly transforming from chaotic to organized. Luna found herself settling into the meditative rhythm of physical work, the satisfaction of visible progress, the way attention to detail could turn something ordinary into something better. "Luna," Brittany said as they moved to the windows, "can I ask you something?" "Sure. Why doesn't your dad ever seem angry? I mean, about the way people treat him here? The things they say." She trailed off, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of her own question. Luna considered this as she sprayed window cleaner in careful patterns. "He says anger is useful for about 30 seconds. After that, it just gets in the way of solving problems." "But doesn't it bother him, the way people look down on what he does?" "I think it bothers him that people look down on anything," Luna said slowly, "but he's not trying to change their minds about him. He's trying to do good work." Brittany nodded thoughtfully, working on a particularly stubborn smudge near the bottom of the window. "My parents always talk about the importance of hard work, but they mean homework and test prep and building resumes. I don't think they've ever actually..." worked like this. By the time Marisol came to inspect their progress, the biology lab looked better than it had in months. Windows gleamed, surfaces shone, and the floor showed the careful attention that comes from understanding that details matter. "Not bad for beginners," Marisol said, running her finger along a windowsill and checking for dust. "Brittany, you missed the corners on these windows." "Luna, good attention to detail on the lab tables." Brittany's face fell slightly, but she nodded and reached for the window cleaner without complaint. Luna watched her roommate, former enemy, acquaintance, attack the corners with newfound determination. Across the hall, Owen Park was having a different experience entirely. Paired with Marcus Webb, a scholarship student from the East Side whose family knew plenty about hard work, Owen was discovering that his usual charm and deflection tactics were useless against dirty floors and grimy surfaces. "This is ridiculous," Owen complained for the 10th time in an hour. "I'm going to Harvard. I shouldn't be scrubbing toilets." Marcus, who'd been methodically cleaning desk chairs with the sort of efficiency that spoke of experience, paused and looked at Owen with something that might have been pity. "You're not scrubbing toilets," Marcus said mildly. "You're cleaning a classroom where kids learn calculus and literature and all the stuff you think makes you better than the people who keep this place running." "That's not what I meant." "Yeah, it is," Marcus returned to his work. "But here's the thing, Owen. My mom cleans office buildings downtown. 40 hours a week, sometimes more. She's got a college degree, too, English literature from state. But she cleans offices because it pays better than substitute teaching and has health insurance." Owen was quiet for a moment, perhaps processing the idea that the people he'd dismissed might have stories more complex than his assumptions allowed. "The point is," Marcus continued, "this work isn't beneath you because you're special. It's beneath you because you've never had to learn its value." At the end of the first session, Daniel gathered the students back in the maintenance office. They looked tired, slightly grimy, and noticeably subdued compared to their arrival 2 hours earlier. "Questions about today?" he asked. Sarah Chen raised her hand. "Mr. Vega, how often do the custodians clean every classroom?" "Every day, sometimes twice a day, depending on usage." "Every classroom? In the whole school?" "Every classroom, every bathroom, every hallway, every office." Daniel let that sink in. Marisol and her team maintain about 200,000 square feet of space. They know this building better than anyone. Which rooms get the most use, which systems are starting to fail, which areas need extra attention. Luna watched her father speak and felt something shifting in her understanding of the school around her. She'd always known her dad worked at Riverton, but she'd never considered the scope of what that meant, the complexity of maintaining an institution, the skill required to keep everything functioning seamlessly. "Tomorrow," Daniel continued, "you'll work with our groundskeeping team. Weather permitting, you'll help maintain the gardens and athletic fields. Same principle applies. You're not just cutting grass or pulling weeds. You're creating an environment that supports learning and community." As students began filing out, Owen lingered near the door, his usual confidence replaced by something that looked like uncertainty. "Mr. Vega," he said quietly, "can I ask you something?" Daniel nodded. "Why are you doing this? The program, I mean. It can't be easy, supervising a bunch of kids who don't want to be here." Daniel studied Owen's face, seeing past the designer clothes and entitled attitude to something more vulnerable underneath. "Because," Daniel said simply, "I think you're all capable of being better than you are right now, but first you have to understand what better actually means." Owen nodded slowly and left without another word. Luna watched him go, wondering if 2 weeks of manual labor could really change someone who'd spent 14 years learning that his family's money made him special. "You think it'll work?" she asked her father as they walked to his truck. "Some of them will get it," Daniel said. "Some one them won't. But the ones who do, they'll be different. And maybe they'll help change the ones who don't." Luna climbed into the passenger seat, thinking about Brittany's careful attention to window corners and Marcus Webb's quiet dignity in the face of Owen's complaints. Change was possible, she realized, but it required seeing people clearly, not as categories or stereotypes, but as individuals capable of growth. As they drove home through Riverton's tree-lined streets, Luna felt something she hadn't experienced in months, hope that her school might actually become a place where she belonged. The Riverton Academy boardroom had been designed to intimidate. Mahogany paneling rose to meet cathedral ceilings, while oil portraits of founding families gazed down with painted authority. The conference table could seat 20, but typically hosted only the 7 members of the Board of Trustees. Their monthly meetings, a careful choreography of wealth maintaining control over education. Tonight felt different. Victoria Crane sat at her customary position, not technically the head of the table, but close enough to project influence. She'd called this emergency meeting ostensibly to discuss ongoing disciplinary concerns. But everyone present understood the real agenda: removing Vega from Riverton Academy before her presence could further contaminate their carefully curated environment. Principal Ellsworth occupied his usual seat, shuffling papers with the nervous energy of a man caught between competing pressures. The other board members, Drive, Hartford, Mrs. Chen Morrison, Mr. Webb, and others, filled their chairs with the comfortable authority of people accustomed to making decisions that affected other people's children. "Before we begin," Victoria announced, consulting her leather portfolio, "I want to thank everyone for attending on such short notice. The situation we're facing requires immediate action." Dr. Hartford, whose son James had been surprisingly quiet since starting the Respect and Action program, cleared his throat. "Victoria, perhaps we should wait for—" "For whom?" Victoria's tone was sharp. "We have a quorum. The agenda is clear. We need to address the ongoing disruption caused by the Vega family before it affects our school's reputation further." Ellsworth shifted uncomfortably. "Mrs. Crane, I should mention that we've received a request from a community member to observe tonight's meeting. State law requires that board meetings be open to the public." "What community member?" Victoria's voice carried the dangerous calm of someone unaccustomed to surprises. The boardroom doors opened before Ellsworth could answer. Daniel Vega entered wearing his best shirt and jeans, carrying a manila folder and the quiet confidence of a man who'd spent weeks preparing for this moment. Behind him walked Harper Lou, her teacher's contract folder in hand, and Marisol Rivera, still in her custodian's uniform but holding herself with the dignity of someone who belonged anywhere she chose to stand. Victoria's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: surprise, annoyance, and finally, cold calculation. "Mr. Vega, how unexpected." "Good evening, Mrs. Crane, members of the board." Daniel took a seat in the public gallery, his companions flanking him. "I hope you don't mind observers. I understand these meetings are public record." "Of course not," Dr. Hartford said quickly, though his eyes kept moving between Daniel and Victoria with obvious confusion. "Though I should mention, we typically don't have community members present unless there's been advance notice." "Actually," Daniel said, opening his folder, "I'm not here as a community member." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Victoria leaned forward slightly, her instincts clearly warning her that something had shifted in ways she hadn't anticipated. "Mr. Vega," she said carefully, "while we appreciate your interest in your daughter's education, personnel and disciplinary matters are typically handled through proper channels." "I'm not here about Luna's discipline," Daniel interrupted gently. "I'm here about ownership." Ellsworth's pen slipped from his fingers. The other board members exchanged glances, clearly lost. "Ownership?" Mrs. Chen Morrison asked. Daniel reached into his folder and withdrew a set of legal documents. 3 weeks ago, I inherited my late uncle's estate, Roberto Santos Vega. Perhaps you knew him?" The silence that followed was profound. Victoria's face had gone very pale. "Roberto was one of Riverton Academy's founding investors," Daniel continued, his voice carrying easily in the sudden quiet. "Over 37 years, he quietly acquired additional shares as other investors died or sold their stakes. Always through shell companies, always keeping his involvement private." He placed a document on the table in front of him. "According to the terms of his will and the founding trust agreement, I now own 52% of Riverton Academy." Dr. Hartford was the first to find his voice. That's impossible." "James Morrison at Morrison & Associates handled the legal transfer. I have all the documentation." Daniel's tone remained conversational, almost apologetic. "I'm the majority shareholder, which means I have controlling interest in this institution." Victoria had recovered enough to speak, though her voice shook slightly. "Even if that's true, and I'll need to see verification, ownership doesn't automatically grant you board authority." "Actually, it does." Daniel produced another document. Article 7 of the Founding Trust specifically states that majority ownership conveys automatic board membership and voting authority. I believe the language is to ensure that educational mission remains aligned with founding principles. The room erupted in whispered conversations, board members leaning toward each other with urgent questions. Ellsworth looked like he was witnessing his career implode in real time. Daniel waited for the noise to subside before continuing. I've spent the last 3 weeks reviewing Riverton's operations, financial records, disciplinary reports, board meeting minutes. I've learned some interesting things. Victoria's lawyer instincts kicked in. Any private board discussions are confidential. Nothing private about pattern discrimination, Harper Liu said, speaking for the first time. She opened her folder and placed a sheet of paper on the table. Disciplinary statistics by family income over the past 5 years. Scholarship students are 3 times more likely to be suspended, 4 times more likely to be expelled, despite no correlation with actual misconduct rates. Marisol stepped forward. And I've got 15 years of observations about which families get special treatment and which kids get pushed out for being inconvenient. Victoria stood abruptly. This is highly irregular. If Mr. Vega believes he has some legal claim to authority here, it needs to be verified through proper channels. I agree, Daniel said calmly. James Morrison is standing by to answer any questions about the legal transfer. But in the meantime, I'd like to exercise my voting authority to address tonight's agenda. What agenda? Dr. Hartford asked weakly. Daniel consulted his notes. According to the meeting notice, you're here to discuss removing Luna Vega from Riverton Academy due to behavioral concerns. I'd like to propose an alternative. Victoria sat back down, her face a mask of controlled fury. Mr. Vega, you can't seriously think that your personal interest in this matter? You're right. I can't make decisions about my own daughter. Conflict of interest, Daniel smiled. But I can make decisions about institutional policy. Starting with a comprehensive review of our disciplinary procedures and a formal investigation into potential bias in their application. The board members looked at each other, clearly struggling to process this reversal of expected power dynamics. Mrs. Chen Morrison raised her hand tentatively. Mr. Vega, assuming your ownership claim is valid, what exactly are you proposing? Transparency, accountability. A return to the educational mission your founding documents actually describe. Daniel's voice gained strength. Riverton Academy was established to provide excellent education in an environment of mutual respect and intellectual curiosity. Somewhere along the way, it became a place where money determines worth, and conformity matters more than character. Victoria's composure finally cracked. You cannot seriously believe that one family's grievances justify disrupting an institution that has served this community for nearly 40 years. I don't want to disrupt anything, Daniel said quietly. I want to fix it. He stood, gathering his papers. I'll be scheduling individual meetings with each board member over the next week. We have a lot to discuss about Riverton's future direction. Tonight's proposal to expel Luna is obviously withdrawn. As Daniel headed for the door, Victoria called after him. Mr. Vega, you have no idea what you're interfering with. This school depends on relationships, on trust, on families who have supported it for generations. Daniel paused at the threshold. Mrs. Crane, I've spent 3 weeks learning exactly what this school depends on. The question now is whether you're willing to be part of building something better, or whether you're going to fight to preserve something that's forgotten its purpose. The boardroom doors closed behind him, leaving Victoria Crane staring at 7 confused faces and the sudden realization that her carefully constructed world had just shifted beneath her feet. Outside in the parking lot, Harper Liu shook her head in amazement. Daniel, that was either brilliant or completely insane. Maybe both, Daniel admitted. But Luna deserves a school that sees her value, not her limitations. Marisol grinned. Honey, that woman's gonna come at you with everything she's got. Daniel looked back at the imposing building where his daughter spent her days, where other children like her had been quietly pushed aside to maintain someone else's vision of excellence. Let her come, he said. I've got 37 years of compound interest on my side. The workshop behind Riverton Academy had always been Daniel's sanctuary, a concrete block building where broken desks found new life, where heating systems surrendered their secrets, and where the honest smell of sawdust and machine oil provided refuge from the school's more complicated politics. It was here, among tools he understood and problems he could actually solve, that Daniel discovered just how far Victoria Crane was willing to go to protect her vision of what Riverton Academy should be. He arrived Monday morning to find his sanctuary violated. Spray paint covered the workshop's exterior walls in violent slashes of red and black. The words "Poor People Go Home" dominated the east wall, while welfare trash decorated the main entrance. But it was the personal attack that hit deepest. "Luna Vega is a charity case," painted across the windows in letters 3 feet tall. Daniel stood in the parking lot for several minutes, coffee growing cold in his hands, absorbing the magnitude of the violation. This wasn't random vandalism by bored teenagers. The messages were too specific, too calculated, too clearly designed to wound both him and Luna in the most personal way possible. Marisol found him there 20 minutes later, her face cycling through shock, anger, and grim recognition. "Damn," she said quietly. "Victoria didn't waste any time." "You think she did this?" "Not personally, but she's got connections, influence. Rich people don't do their own dirty work." Marisol pulled out her phone and began photographing the damage. "Question is, what are you going to do about it?" Daniel walked slowly around the building, cataloging the damage. Paint on concrete could be cleaned, but the windows would need replacement. More concerning was what he found when he tried his key. The lock had been damaged, the door forced open. Inside, his tools were scattered across the floor, workbenches overturned, and project materials destroyed, with the sort of systematic thoroughness that spoke of deliberate malice rather than random destruction. "They went through everything," Daniel said, kneeling beside a smashed radio that had kept him company through countless repair jobs. "Looking for something or just trying to send a message?" "Both, probably." Marisol picked up a scattered handful of screws, her movements careful and deliberate. "You know there are cameras out here, right? Parking lot security system." Daniel looked up. He'd forgotten about the cameras. They were Marisol's domain, part of the security infrastructure he'd helped install but never thought much about. "Think they got anything useful?" "Let's find out." An hour later, they sat in the security office, watching grainy footage from the previous night. The timestamp read 2:47 a.m. when a figure in dark clothing approached the workshop. The image quality was poor, but the vandals' movements were systematic, methodical. Someone who knew exactly what they wanted to accomplish. "Can't see the face," Marisol muttered, adjusting the monitor's contrast. "But look at this." She fast-forwarded to 3:15 a.m. when a second figure joined the first. This one was smaller, younger, moving with the particular combination of arrogance and nervousness that Daniel recognized immediately. "Owen Park," he said. "That's what I'm thinking, and if Owen's involved, you know who put him up to it." Daniel watched the footage loop again, noting the way the older figure directed Owen's actions, clearly the one in charge. The face remained obscured, but something about the posture, the gestures, tugged at his memory. "I need to call the police," Daniel said finally. "You sure about that?" Marisol's tone was careful, neutral. "Once you involve cops, this becomes public. News media maybe. Victoria Crane's got connections in law enforcement too." Daniel considered this. A public incident would bring attention he wasn't sure Luna could handle. But letting it slide would signal that intimidation worked, that violence was an acceptable response to challenging authority. "She crossed a line," he said. "This isn't about board politics anymore. This is criminal." The police arrived within an hour, 2 officers who took statements with the professional courtesy that suggested they'd dealt with vandalism at private schools before. Officer Martinez photographed the damage while Officer Chen interviewed Daniel and Marisol about possible suspects. "Any idea who might want to target you specifically?" Chen asked, her pen poised over a notepad. Daniel exchanged glances with Marisol. "I'm involved in some disagreements with the school board. It's possible someone wanted to send a message." "What kind of disagreements?" "Policy differences. How the school treats certain students." Officer Chen made notes, clearly sensing there was more to the story but not pressing for details. "We'll check with the school administration, see if anyone reported suspicious activity. In the meantime, you might want to consider additional security measures." After the police left, Daniel spent the rest of the morning cleaning paint and assessing damage. The work was therapeutic. Concrete problems with concrete solutions, unlike the complex web of politics and power that had made his life so complicated. Harper Lou found him there during her lunch break, carrying coffee and wearing the expression of someone delivering bad news. "I heard about the vandalism," she said, handing him a cup. "I'm sorry, this is my fault." "Your fault? I should have kept my mouth shut at the board meeting, given you time to establish your position before Victoria realized what she was up against." Daniel paused in his scraping of dried paint. "Harper, this isn't about you. Victoria Crane would have retaliated no matter what. This is who she is when her authority gets challenged." "Still, I feel responsible." Harper sat on an overturned bucket, looking around at the damaged workshop. "There's something else you need to know. Owen's been bragging." Daniel set down his scraper. "About what?" "About teaching you a lesson. About showing. Charity cases. What happens when they get too big for their britches?" Harper's voice was tight with anger. "He's not exactly being subtle about it. Any other students involved?" "Not directly. But word's getting around. Some kids think it's hilarious, others are disturbed. Luna doesn't know yet. I made sure of that, but she will soon." Daniel nodded grimly. In a place like Riverton, secrets had a half-life measured in hours, not days. That afternoon, Owen Park reported to the maintenance office for his regular respect and action assignment, with the swagger of someone who just won a significant victory. His usual arrogance had been amplified, fed by whatever praise he'd received for his midnight activities. "Heard you had some trouble with vandals, Mr. Vega," Owen said, his tone carrying just enough false sympathy to make his meaning clear. "Shame about your workshop. People can be so destructive when they're angry." Daniel looked at Owen for a long moment, seeing past the teenage bravado to something more troubling, a young man who'd been taught that power meant the ability to hurt others without consequence. "Yes," Daniel said quietly, "they can be." He handed Owen a mop and bucket. "Today you're working with Mrs. Rodriguez in the science wing. 3 classrooms, standard cleaning protocol." "What? I thought I was supposed to work outside today. Garden maintenance." "Change of plans." Daniel's tone was perfectly neutral, professionally polite. "Mrs. Rodriguez will explain your assignments." Owen took the cleaning supplies with obvious reluctance, his earlier confidence beginning to waver. "Mr. Vega, about what happened to your workshop?" "What about it?" I mean, if you're thinking about accusing anyone without proof, that could be really problematic. False accusations can have serious consequences." Daniel stepped closer, not threatening, just present in a way that reminded Owen of the significant difference in their size and experience. "Owen," Daniel said quietly, "I don't make accusations without proof, but when I have proof, I follow through every time." The color drained from Owen's face. He clutched his mop handle like a lifeline and hurried toward the stairs, leaving Daniel alone with his thoughts and the growing certainty that Victoria Crane's retaliation was just beginning. That evening, Daniel sat at his kitchen table with Luna, helping her with homework, while his laptop displayed security footage and police report forms. Luna worked through algebra problems with her usual focused intensity, occasionally glancing at her father with the perceptive concern that reminded him how much she'd inherited from her mother. "Dad," she said during a break between problem sets, "kids are saying weird things at school. About you, about our family." Daniel saved his work and closed the laptop. "What kind of things?" "That we don't belong at Riverton, that scholarship students should know their place." Luna's voice was carefully controlled, but Daniel heard the hurt underneath. "Someone painted stuff about us, didn't they?" Daniel considered lying, protecting her from adult cruelties she shouldn't have to understand. But Luna had earned honesty through months of quiet strength, and he wouldn't insult that by treating her like a child who couldn't handle truth. "Someone vandalized my workshop," he said, "including some things about you, about us." Luna nodded slowly, absorbing this. "Owen Park?" "Probably. We have it on camera, but the video isn't clear enough for identification." "What are you going to do?" Daniel looked at his daughter, 13 years old. Brilliant, brave, forced to navigate a world that questioned her worth because of numbers on tax forms and addresses on envelopes. "I'm going to make sure it doesn't happen again," he said, "and I'm going to make sure the people responsible understand that actions have consequences." Luna smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her in weeks. "Good." As she returned to her homework, Daniel reopened his laptop and began drafting an email to every member of Riverton's Board of Trustees. Victoria Crane had chosen escalation, had decided that intimidation and vandalism were acceptable tools for maintaining control. She was about to learn that Daniel Vega had tools of his own. The small balcony outside their apartment had never been much to look at, just enough space for 2 folding chairs and a view of the hardware store's parking lot. But on this particular evening, with spring air carrying the scent of blooming trees and the soft sound of distant traffic, it felt like the most important place in the world. Daniel and Luna sat in comfortable silence, sharing a bag of chips and watching the sun set behind the modest skyline of their working-class neighborhood. It had been 3 days since the workshop vandalism, 3 days of police interviews and insurance claims, and careful conversations with school administrators, who suddenly seemed very interested in Daniel's perspective on campus security. "Dad," Luna said finally, her voice carrying the particular tone that meant she'd been thinking about something important. "Can I ask you something?" Daniel nodded, settling deeper into his chair. "Were you ever ashamed of your work? Before all this started, I mean. When I first got the scholarship, and you had to come to Riverton every day." The question hit Daniel like a physical blow, not because it was unexpected, but because it was so precisely the thing he'd been afraid she might be feeling. "Luna," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "I was never ashamed of my work, but I was afraid you might be ashamed of me." Luna turned to look at him, surprise clear on her face. "Why would I be ashamed of you?" "Because you're brilliant. Because you belong in those classrooms with the smartest kids in the state. Because you deserved opportunities I couldn't give you on my own." Daniel's voice was quiet but steady. "And because I know how cruel kids can be to anyone who's different." "You thought I'd want you to be different?" "I thought you might want a father who could afford to send you to Riverton without a scholarship, one who showed up to school events in a suit instead of work clothes." Luna was quiet for a long moment, processing this. When she spoke again, her voice was fierce with certainty. "Dad, do you know what I see when I look at you?" Daniel shook his head. "I see someone who can fix anything, who kept our family together when Mom was sick, who works harder than anyone I know and never complains about it." Luna's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I see someone who taught me that being smart isn't enough. You have to be kind and honest and willing to help people even when it's difficult." Daniel felt something tight in his chest begin to loosen. "Luna, I'm not finished." Her voice carried the determined authority of her mother, the stubborn insistence on being heard. "You want to know what I'm ashamed of? I'm ashamed that I let Owen Park make me feel small. I'm ashamed that I stopped drawing in public because I was afraid people would judge my subjects. I'm ashamed that I've been hiding who I am to make other people comfortable." She reached into her backpack and pulled out a sketchbook. Not the one Owen had destroyed, but a new one, its pages filled with careful drawings. "Look," she said, opening to the first page. Daniel found himself staring at a portrait of Marisol, captured in the moment of explaining proper floor cleaning technique to a group of reluctant students. The drawing was incredibly detailed, showing not just Marisol's physical features, but her patience, her quiet dignity, her refusal to be diminished by other people's assumptions about her work. Luna turned the page. Harper Liu, grading papers late in her classroom, surrounded by motivational posters and student artwork, her face showing the tired satisfaction of someone who'd found her calling. Another page, Marcus Webb from the Respect in Action program, teaching Owen Park how to properly clean laboratory equipment, his expression patient but firm. And finally, a drawing that made Daniel's breath catch, his own hands holding a wrench, but rendered with such care and attention that they looked like something sacred, something worthy of reverence. "This is what I see," Luna said quietly. "This is what I want people to understand. Work isn't just what you do, it's who you are. And the people who think they're better than us because they don't get their hands dirty, they don't understand the first thing about real value." Daniel stared at the drawings, seeing his daughter's talent but also her vision, her ability to find beauty and dignity in things other people overlooked or dismissed. "Luna, these are incredible. Ms. Liu thinks I should enter them in the regional youth art competition. The theme this year is community. What holds us together? What makes us stronger?" Luna's voice gained confidence as she spoke. "I want to do a whole series. People at Riverton who actually make it work. Not the board members or the donors, but the teachers and custodians and maintenance staff who show up every day and care about students. What about the other kids, won't they? Let them talk. Luna's chin lifted with familiar stubbornness. I'm tired of making myself smaller so other people can feel bigger. If they don't like my art, they don't have to look at it. Daniel felt a surge of pride so intense it was almost overwhelming. When did you get so wise? I learned from watching you. You never let anyone make you feel less than what you are, even when they tried. Luna closed the sketchbook and looked out over their modest neighborhood. And now that you own the school, now that I own the school, nothing changes about who we are, Daniel said firmly. We don't need money or power to validate our worth, but we can use them to help other kids like us. Daniel nodded. That's the plan. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching lights come on in apartment windows, listening to the everyday sounds of working families settling in for the evening. Finally, Luna spoke again. There's something else I want to do. What's that? I want to apologize to Owen. Daniel turned to stare at her. Apologize? Luna, he vandalized my workshop. He's been bullying you for months. I know, but I also know what it's like to be angry and scared and lash out at people who don't deserve it. Luna's voice was thoughtful, mature beyond her years. Owen's parents are never around. His father sends money instead of spending time. His mother uses him as a social accessory. That doesn't excuse what he did. No, it doesn't. But maybe understanding why he did it could help him choose differently next time. Luna looked at her father with earnest intensity. You're teaching him that work has dignity. Maybe I can teach him that kindness is stronger than cruelty. Daniel studied his daughter's face, seeing determination mixed with compassion, steel wrapped in gentleness. She was 13 years old and already wiser than most adults he knew. You don't owe Owen Park anything, he said finally. I know, but maybe that's exactly why I should do it. The next day, Luna found Owen at his locker after the final bell, when the hallways were mostly empty and their conversation could be private. He looked up with the wariness of someone who'd spent 3 days waiting for consequences that hadn't yet arrived. Owen, Luna said quietly, can we talk? His face cycled through several expressions, surprise, suspicion, defiance, before settling on resignation. If this is about the workshop thing, I didn't. I'm not here to accuse you of anything. Luna's voice was calm, without anger or judgment. I'm here to apologize. Owen's mouth fell open slightly. What? I'm sorry I pushed you in the art room. I'm sorry I let my anger control my actions. Physical violence is never okay, even when someone destroys something precious to you. Owen stared at her for a long moment, clearly struggling to process this unexpected turn. But you, I know you destroyed my drawing on purpose, Luna continued gently, and I know you were probably involved in what happened to my dad's workshop. But that doesn't make what I did right. Why are you telling me this? Luna considered the question seriously. Because I think you're better than the worst thing you've done. And because maybe if I show you that kindness is possible, you might choose it next time instead of cruelty. Owen's face went through a complex series of emotions, confusion, guilt, something that might have been relief. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I'm sorry, too, about your drawing, about everything. Luna nodded. I know. She turned to walk away, then paused. Owen, the Respect in Action program isn't punishment. It's opportunity. My dad's trying to teach you something important, if you're willing to learn it. As Luna walked down the hallway toward her father's truck, Owen Park stood by his locker and felt something he hadn't experienced in months, the possibility that he could be someone different, someone better. In the truck, Daniel looked at his daughter with renewed amazement. How did it go? I think he heard me, Luna said simply. Maybe that's enough. As they drove home through the tree-lined streets of Riverton's wealthy neighborhoods, Daniel felt something settling into place. Not victory, exactly, but the quiet satisfaction of work done well and progress made toward something better. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to build the kind of school Luna deserved. But tonight, driving home with his remarkable daughter beside him, Daniel Vega felt the deep contentment that comes from knowing exactly who you are and being proud of it. The Riverton Academy's spring showcase had never felt quite like this before. Where previous years had featured predictable displays of academic achievement and fundraising successes, this year's event buzzed with genuine excitement and curiosity. The auditorium overflowed with students, parents, and faculty gathered to witness something unprecedented, a celebration that honored all forms of excellence. Luna Vega stood beside her art display, hands clasped behind her back, watching as visitors studied her community series. The portraits she'd entered in the regional competition, which had taken first place, now occupied a place of honor near the stage. Marisol Rivera teaching dignity through work. Harper Lou grading papers with tired devotion. Marcus Webb bridging social divides through patient example. And at the center, Daniel's weathered hands holding a wrench, with the reverence usually reserved for sacred objects. "It's remarkable," said Dr. Hartford, studying the portrait of Marisol with genuine appreciation. "You've captured something essential about what makes this place work." Luna nodded, surprised by his sincerity. "She taught me that there's no such thing as unskilled labor, only labor that people haven't learned to respect yet." Across the auditorium, Owen Park was disassembling sound equipment with careful precision, his movements showing the methodical patience he'd learned through weeks of respect in action. When a younger student offered to help, Owen actually smiled, something that would have been unthinkable 4 months ago. Principal Ellsworth took the stage as the evening's presentations began, his voice carrying new confidence as he outlined the changes that had transformed Riverton Academy. The Respect in Action program was now permanent, with waiting lists of students volunteering to participate. Disciplinary incidents had dropped 40%. Most significantly, the school's first anonymous student survey revealed unprecedented levels of satisfaction across all demographic groups. Tonight, Ellsworth announced, "We celebrate not just academic achievement, but the full spectrum of excellence that defines our community." He introduced presentations ranging from advanced chemistry research to carpentry projects built during Respect in Action sessions. Students who'd never shared a stage before stood together, their diverse talents finally recognized as equally valuable. When Luna's name was called to present her artwork, she walked to the microphone with steady confidence. No longer the girl who made herself small to avoid attention, she spoke clearly about finding beauty in overlooked places and dignity in dismissed people. "Art isn't just about making pretty pictures," she said, gesturing toward her portraits. "It's about showing truth, especially truths that make people uncomfortable." The applause was thunderous, led by Marisol and Harper but spreading throughout the auditorium. Even Victoria Crane, seated stiffly in the front row, managed polite acknowledgement. As the evening wound down, Daniel stood with Luna outside the auditorium, watching families stream past with genuine smiles instead of social obligations fulfilled. "Think it'll stick?" Luna asked, tucking her first-place ribbon into her portfolio. Daniel looked back at the building where his daughter had found her voice and his own purpose had crystallized into something larger than fixing broken pipes. "Change always sticks," he said, "when it comes from the right place." Hand in hand, they walked toward their truck, no longer just surviving Riverton Academy, but having fundamentally transformed it into a place where worth was measured not by wealth, but by character, compassion, and the courage to see everyone clearly. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.